gentlemen, and everybody else who likes a different label, a very, very, very warm welcome to the Arts of Resistance Festival 22 edition. No, that won't do, that won't do. Arts of Resistance 2022, give it up! One more time, because you love to resist everything that oppresses. All right. So many things are going on as we are here joined in a room that's pretty full to listen on a Saturday evening to political, social, activist, revolutionary stuff. I'm not sure if the world has gone crazy or if we have gone crazy to do this on a Saturday evening, but I'm happy you're here. As the DJ plays more beautiful sounds downstairs, and I think in the room next to us there are film screenings. They'll be taking place all evening, I believe. In this room, we'll be having a number of conversations and panel discussions about art, imperialism, and resistance. I'll tell you all about that right after we have our opening act. And the social artist activist, well, she will say it herself, but she'll pronounce it better. We'll do a decolonial performance combining henna dance and resistance. When I pronounce her name, you give her a huge applause, then she'll say a few words, and then we will be in awe at her performance. Anima Janguru Ruissen, give it up to her.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and so wonderful to see you and have you here at this amazing festival, which I think we should have lots and lots more in the Netherlands. So thank you for the introduction, and I'll just give you a little bit of context of what I'm going to perform, because contrary to the belief of contemporary art, my art is not abstracted, not liberated from the history, time, and people. I would not prefer you to interpret it as a blanco slate. We need to deeply listen in togetherness to each other's heart, to our being as a part of Earth. Our heart beats without us telling it to beat. We don't say, please give me 80 beats per minute. That means there are other knowledges living within our bodies. We need to deeply listen, reconnect, and transform. You will not see a dancer's body on stage. A dancer's body, as A for anonymous. Dancer's body, as if there is a norm for a dancer's body. That is my resistance against outside of history thinking. Modernity imposes us what a dancer should be. In honor of our history, ancestors, I continue their resistance through henna and dance, and I am grateful that you are going to be a part of this. Thank you.
Let's give another applause of admiration and respect to Anima. Thank you so much, Anima. Thank you so much. Friends and everybody included that is entering the room now and finding a nice place to sit, you can take my seat because I'll be on stage most of the time. Welcome to you all. Let me say a few words while the stage is being set up and you are making yourself comfortable. You can also go upstairs if you want, as you can see. So welcome once more to the Arts of Resistance Festival of 2022. As I said in this room, nothing gets attention as an applause. Arts of Resistance 2022, give it up! In this section, we'll be talking until about 10 o'clock about how culture and art resists imperialism and neo-colonialism. I was asked to provide a very brief definition of imperialism and neo-colonialism. There'll be an exam afterwards, so please make sure you take good notes. It is the ongoing practice of the powers that be, the dominant military forces in the world, to dominate, or at least attempt to dominate politically, economically, and culturally the third world or the global south. Of course, all in the interest of having more power and more money. And I said attempt to dominate because it's always an attempt. There's always resistance. One form of resistance is culture and art. And we'll be discussing this today with a number of artists / revolutionary activists of previous generations who are still with us and we can learn from their fantastic experience, as well as current generations. I'll be introducing them to you in a bit. We'll have 3 panel discussions, and they will be interluded with more performances. After all, we should have performances. We're talking about art. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Al-Jaberi. I'm a professional moderator. My little ZZP thing is called Pro Moderation. I've also been involved for quite a while in activism as well as performing music. So I'm very thrilled to be able to combine my work with the 2 things that I love the most, music and change. And I thank the Arts of Resistance Festival for the invitation. Have I forgotten anything, Chris, before we get the panel on stage? Can I please ask the esteemed members of the panel to join us on stage? Oh yeah, so I did forget something. We have another fantastic performance. And after that, we'll start the panels. And this one is the song Genjer Genjer, and will be performed by multidisciplinary artist and multi-instrumentalist Renadi Santoso. He's also a composer, and before he performs the song, I'll ask what the song is about. So please come forward. Ooh, there you are. Welcome. Renadi, do you mind telling us very briefly what this song is about before you perform it, or do you prefer to perform first and then tell us what it is?
Well, let me explain a little bit. I try to be brief. It's a song from Indonesia. It's an old hit song, you could say. And it's originally about a kind of, a plant which you can eat. But it's considered as a poor man's food. And especially in the World War II, during the Japanese occupation of Indonesia, people had to rely on this kind of food. And the original song is actually quite innocent and not political at all. But it became political in a certain way, in that it became associated with the Communist Party in Indonesia. And especially at the moment that the Indonesian Communist Party fell in 1965, which resulted in a bloody massacre of communist people or people that were considered communist. The song got a second meaning, you would say, a second life, but in the shadows, because in the song it's about a water plant which floats in water in the river, and at a certain point it became a symbol of all the corpses of the massacred people who were thrown in the river. And that's why it was banned by the military government at that time in Indonesia. So I will perform it in Indonesian. If you Google this song, you will find quite a lot of versions of the song. So I chose one version. If you Google, you might hear very other versions which sound very different. And I will perform it in Indonesian, in Dutch, and also in English, so that you all get a taste of the meaning. The translations are very, very free, so not very little, so please take that in account. This is Genja Genja.
Genjai, Genjai, Renadi Santoso.
Hi, hi. Genja, 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 berjejer-jejer. Genja, Genja, semuanya berjejer-jejer. Genja, Genja, semuanya berjejer-jejer. Waterhyacinten drijven op de stroom. Waterhyacinten drijven op de stroom. Waterhyacinten drijven naar de zee. Genja, Genja, banyak genja, berjejer-jejer. Genja, Genja, semuanya berjejer-jejer. Genja, Genja, semuanya berjejer-jejer. Waterhyacinten drijven naar de zee. Waterhyacinten drijven naar de zee. Waterhyacinten drijven naar de zee. Sweet smelling rose sweet-smelling rose floating on the river. Sweet-smelling rose floating on the screen. Sweet-smelling rose, your leaves are red. Sweet-smelling rose, sinking into the deep. Genje, 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 semuanya berjejer. Genje, 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 berjejer, jejer. Genje, genje, semuanya berjejer, jejer. Genje, genje, semuanya berjejer, jejer.
So, it's beautiful how food becomes a symbol of resistance. As our first performing artist said, the art that you'll see today is not abstracted or detached from the reality of ordinary people. That was fantastic. We'll continue talking about Genje Genje as well, but first I'll introduce the panel. But maybe they should come forward first. Could the esteemed members of the panel, and this time it's for real, please come forward and take their seats at the front. Let me bridge the distance first and start with the speaker that we have online. Could you wave if you hear us? Tings, Chak. Give Tings an applause, please. Tings is art director at the Tricontinental Institute, and the portraits that you can see on the screen are hers. We'll make a little cliffhanger and I'll tell you later on what they stand for. And then I'll start from this side. With us is Nadia Tilon of Sison, de Landelijke Organisatie Surinamers in Nederland, the national organizations of Surinamese people in the Netherlands. Also, someone with an artistic background. Give her a big applause. It's an honor to have you. Moving on with us is Siswa Santoso. He's a social justice inspired cultural worker and artist who did most of his work previously in Indonesia and moved to the Netherlands. And he's been here for a couple of decennia. So we're happy you are with us, and please give him an applause as well. And last but not least is Joma Sison, former Filipino guerrilla leader, who fought the US-backed dictatorship of Marcos. Great honor to have you with us here. Next to him sits his interpreter, who helps him to be able to hear us better. And what's your name, sir? Aldo. Give Aldo an applause. I'll come and sit with you to make it a little more cozy. And let me get the water. All right. I thought to change the questions that I had prepared. That I prepared. That in fact also Chris is the. Give Chris an applause for organizing this and doing the editorial work. And maybe have a round of one question to each of you. Tell us how imperialism and neo-colonialism still affects the places where you are from, the Philippines, Suriname, and also Indonesia. But I'll ask you in this case to keep it short, maybe just a 2-minute history and current affairs lesson, so that we're all on the same page and no one feels, what the hell are they talking about? I should have Wikipedia'd this, if it's on Wikipedia at all. Where shall we start? Siswa?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
How are imperial powers still trying to control Indonesia, and how did they do it at the time when you were in Indonesia, trying to fight back against the dictatorship?
Well, in retrospect, as my country fellow already briefly explained, that Genjer Genjer is actually a kind of folk song, which after the massacre of '65, it is forbidden. Since then...
Who did the massacre, just so we all know what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Who was it that did the massacre?
Well, almost millions of people supposed to be sympathizers or members of communist parties, or let's say left-wing progressive people, have been killed or put into prisons or disappeared, or brought to the camp concentration of isolated island. It's called Buru. Yeah.
Okay.
And since then, as the progressive thinking, progressive power is disappeared.
And which government was doing this?
Suharto governments, yeah, not only influenced but led by the West and Japan. And from there, we got the control of the country from outside, and through yearly organized the so-called international intergovernmental group on Indonesia, which gave money each year to Indonesia. But from Indonesia, they got almost all kind of natural resources, and also the people is also extremely exploited to get the super profit run by in the meantime multinational transnational corporations. After the reformations, that is beginning of the years 2000s, we got another kind of new imperialism form, not only multinational or transnational corporation, but we call it as an oligarch. They control all political life, economic policy, and that kind of thing. And not directly, the West and Japan at the time controlled the country, but indirectly. Also at the moment, it is not purely led by the U.S. anymore, but it is more influence from the China with the Obor project, one belt, one road infrastructure projects, as we all know, all over the world. Yeah.
So there's really a question of self-determination here. From the outside, Indonesian political elites are influenced.
Yes.
Very good. We'll get back to you. Let's move on to Mr. Joma Sison. A 2-minute history of colonialism in the Philippines.
Well, the Philippines had been a colony of the U.S. since the beginning of the 20th century. And since 1946, the U.S. granted the so-called independence. It's a sham type of independence because the U.S. Made sure that that the Philippines would remain a semi-colony or neo-colony. The U.S. Continues to control the Philippine economy, Philippine politics, and Philippine culture. And how does the U.S. Do this? So it remains the biggest foreign monopoly capitalist power to which the big compradors, landlords, and the bureaucrat capitalists are subservient to. And politically, well, it provides the strategic planning, the intelligence, and the arms to the reactionary armed forces and police. So that means control of the Philippine state. No? And culturally, the U.S. has simply adopted Christianity as part of the Westernization that was started by Spanish colonialism since the 16th century. And but the most important thing is the dominance of American culture in the form of Hollywood for a long time, and of course, so many types of cultural control. You come down to the internet. The U.S. Supplies the programs and everything else. The U.S. controls the educational system, the books, and so on. And in the Catholic Church, you had Spanish friars before, or you can have Jesuits from New York, and also so many Protestant sects. So that's the way how the U.S. controls the Philippines.
Brilliant summary, thank you very much. So an interconnectedness of various forms of domination, cultural, military, political, and economic. And very interesting just to highlight, whereas colonialism is, there is a Western, let's say a white person in charge of a third world country, neocolonialism means there's an elite from that country, at least they look like it, but they're controlled from the outside, and that's the point that Mr. Sison was pointing to at the beginning. Moving to my right, Nadia, Surinamese roots. Very quick history lesson about colonialism of Suriname.
A very quick one.
500 years of history in 2 minutes.
Yes. Suriname was a colony of Holland from 1667 on. And when they conquered the country on the indigenous people. And in 1975, Suriname became independent. And as we heard just now, it was not a really independent as we wanted, a national liberation, I will say. It was, it was, we were on our own, that was a good step. And Holland presented us on international, podia. So that's a good step. And our people struggled for ending the Dutch colonialism, but it was still not ended. Because at the time in the 70s, Suriname was full in, the economy of Suriname was in the hands of United States and the Dutch mostly, multinationals, etc. So in the 80s, we had a military coup. There came a dictatorship with murders and a lot of undemocratic undemocratic situation, and it ended in 2020. So it was a very dark period, 40 years long. So the challenge now for the people in Suriname is how the country is bankrupt, how to overcome the bad situation. We have a democratic chosen government now. That doesn't mean it is a people's government. And we recently now, we have a lot of gold in our country, and you have foreign corporations working there in the mines, not really mines, but they're seeking gold. And recently there was oil found before the coast of Suriname. So, and EMF is now moving in, IMF, and because the country is bankrupt. And so we will see what it will bring us.
So an interesting
Yes.
point here that even democracy at least formal democracy doesn't equal getting rid of colonialism. Let's go back to our speaker who is online. Tings, you're still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
There you are. Your organization is called the Tricontinental Institute. You take a perspective from the south of the globe as a whole. Could you tell us about what you do and how cultural resistance is important?
Sure. First of all, I want to just thank everyone who's there in person and all the organizers for inviting me. So Tricontinental, as an institute for social research, we draw our legacy from the history of national liberation struggles of the Third World. And our name itself, Tricontinental, actually draws the name, pays homage to the Tricontinental Conference that was hosted by the Cuban people in 1966, that drew together over 500 delegates from liberation movements across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And from this moment, the organization OSPAO, the Organization of Solidarity between the Peoples of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, was born. So as an institute, we're interested in producing knowledge and art from the perspective and from the aspirations of today's people's struggles. And we see ourselves as being part of, this battle of ideas, and an idea that Fidel Castro really put forward, and art and culture being a big part of that battle. So one of the things that we're motivated by is to draw from our tradition of national liberation Marxism, or what we're calling national liberation Marxism. Because there's often an idea that, theory originates from the global north, whether it's from Europe or North America. And in the global south, we put that theory into practice. But of course, we're debating colonialism today, and that's a very colonial view about what the role of the global south has been for, the kind of global consciousness. So part of what we want to do is sort of draw from, that theory that was created, and the art and culture created out of the trenches of liberation, and how basically, and Frantz Fanon really talked about this idea, stretching that theory to fit the conditions and the realities of the Third World. We see a lot of the work, and I think we're going to hear more about it in the panel today, around whether it's the struggles in the Philippines to LECRA in Indonesia or in Cuba and across the colonized world, really. The art and culture should have a place in how we situate that internationally, and how we think about our history or cultural history. And so some of the work we've been doing, in addition to producing artworks like some of the ones we're showing today, is also publications that look into the various art and cultural organizations, revolutionary work from Cuba, from LECRA. We produced something on the 70th anniversary of LECRA's founding, to Mao Zedong's lectures on art and literature that we also recently published.
Okay.
Because we really see this as, just to kind of wrap up, is that it's not a nostalgic look into the past of what happened, but how does this feed into our current struggles today, people's movements today?
Brilliant. Thanks also for clarifying that last point. I'll touch on the history nonetheless. LECRA was mentioned a couple of times. LECRA was a mass organization whose focus was cultural and artistic in Indonesia. Could you briefly tell us about LECRA and how you were helped in your revolutionary education by that organization?
Thank you. Well, LECRA is, to my mind, it is pro-people mass cultural France.
Active in the 60s, yeah?
Yeah, which is established at the beginning of the 50s. And by the end of the 50s, they introduced genjer as a kind of, symbolize the hard time, the hardship of the especially peasant family.
So it was Lekra that composed that song, Genjer from Genjer?
No.
They popularized it and gave
They
the
popularized
revolutionary
it,
meaning.
yeah. The composer is named Muhammad Arif. He is not a communist one, even not a leftist, but he is captured because of the popular of that song, you know. Yeah. Thus it resembles the hard time of the people's life.
How many members
And,
did Lekra have?
I think almost 800,000.
800,000 members.
Yes.
And
Thus
you were
they-
introduced to Lekra at university, am I right?
Yeah. Thus they use artworks as a weapon against reactionary. Well, I was get in touch with the Lekra for the first time during my student times. I visited the library, and there's a woman, old woman, who has a special attention to me. I don't know why, what. Maybe I have a Chinese background, and in Yogyakarta where I study, a Chinese school has been cracked down by the military and by reactionary young people. And those lecturers from the art academy helped the Chinese to run away from the place. Maybe, I don't know. Thus from her, I got a book written by Pramudia Anantatur, which his work is already translated by almost all modern languages. Thus, the function of a Lekra, especially in the villages, serve the people. What is interesting, and up to now, it's still popular, the younger generation also try to learn from Lekra. He adopt something like werkwijze. That is a method of work in integrating themselves to the people, the peasants community especially. And from there, they make a kind of social investigation, and together with the peasant family also make a class analysis. So you can imagine who has what, how much in means of production in a certain area.
So one of the things they did is to use cultural forms and art
Yes.
to introduce revolutionary thinking to...
Sure. Yeah.
In a sense, then, your revolutionary education was through cultural means by Lekra.
Sure. Thus, I should say, institutionally, it is not a revolutionary one, but there's one element, the librarians who has, I think, has a Lekra background. It proves that after some years, I was brought to a small community in Yogyakarta, and it turns that they all are Lekra, and they cannot declare themselves publicly Lekra. It's very dangerous.
We'll get back to this element after our next performance, which is by one of our panelists. Could you tell us, very brief, because we're running there's so much to discuss and we're running late. What is your song about? It is a song about the Bijlmer Krakers, the Bijlmer squatters. The Bijlmer is a neighborhood in the southeast of Amsterdam.
Well, are we going to perform one or two? Two. That's what I heard, two. So, but we'll do it quickly. And the second song you told us already, you told the audience already what it's about. And it's about the squatting of Surinamese families in the 70s. They squatted 101 houses in the Bijlmer, and it was a great action, successfully, in spite of the police violence. And this song is about the squatting. That's the second one we're going to sing, and the first one is named Strepoku. It's about the heroes of Suriname, who struggled, fought the colonialism in Suriname from the slavery time until the 70s, because this song was written in the 70s also. It was written by the Lowkey choir.
Please give Nadia a big applause for her performance.
And I have a request. I have a request because you must help me. I haven't sing these songs for decades, and my voice is a little bit old now. So help me to sing the phrase. It's the simple one. Streepoko. And I don't know if we can have it. You have it on paper.
Everyone has the lyrics, or the most people, and otherwise you have to share. And as I think Max is going to try to beam it. So,
and anyway, will we rehearse the phrase, Mark?
Look at Max.
With the audience. So, are you ready? I want to hear you.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Opo kondre mangu feti le kwa fuchara makti kona Tile kwa fuchara makti kona Nog een keer, want ik hoor jullie niet. Makti kona
One more time.
Yeah. Charamati kona
Okay, perfect. Then we want the audience to use their feet to make like a this time. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Opo kondre mangu feti le kwa mafu charamati kona Kondre mangu feti le kwa mafu charamati kona Waarom boni sholi kerbeleru fu organiseer Dembe chade maron kona wang Fort buku bende na bastion Ready musu fado wan fruwang Da de tapu wan jullie Alla isriketi koti ini misrana Unstrede Beetje vals? Opo kondre mangu feti le kwa mafuchara makti kona Opo kondre mangu feti le kwa mafuchara makti kona Ramchani nang matura na pernasi den bentang Den be fetiji den dringi nang anyang Matu paviro umukaritu Sorun taki frede no mande Tenaleti dena unusi So oru nang atiki den be abi Day for day Opo kondre mangu feti le kwa mafuchara makti kona Ja, goed zo. Opo kondre mangu feti le kwa mafuchara makti kona De krom nanga dudal ben bribi en de vroko mang dat meki den bechade kona wang Go vini abaisa usaka membre De ede mandi Taki unu feyanti ano kuli blakama Mapalanti nanga ala de asema De teku sweti Agrong, nanga agrong That's the Opo kondre mangu feti Le kwa mafuchara makti kona Opo kondre mangu feti Le kwa mafuchara makti kona Applaus! Dankjewel. Wordt wat voor?
Okay, for the next song, we want you to sing along as well because this thing is really going pretty well. Not pretty well, it's going fantastic. Next, Max, the next lyrics, some of them have it in your hand. The refrain, the chorus, can we sing it? It's de strijd van de Belmekrakers. Krakers voor Bemre,
Krakers voor Bemre, krakers voor Bemre, krakers voor Bemre, Bovina streek.
Max, kan je hem tevoren krijgen misschien? Naar boven, naar boven, naar boven. Yes, dit is hem. Naar boven, naar boven. Naar boven, naar boven. Ja, ja. Hey. Krakers voor, krakers voor.
Jullie zijn er klaar voor? Krakers voor Bemre, krakers voor Krakers voor Bemre, krakers voor Bemre. Wowina streek, wowina streek. Ja, nog een keer. Nee, even aftellen. Gaat iets te snel. Zijn jullie ready? Ja. Volle borst, hè? Dat is Nederlandse tekst. Ja. Eén keer oefenen. Krakers voor Bemre, krakers voor Bemre, krakers voor Bemre. Wowina streek, wowina streek.
Zijn we klaar voor?
Oké, we gaan beginnen.
Wat betekent dat nou?
Belmenkrakers, krakers van de Belmen. We zullen de strijd winnen. En ze hebben gewonnen. De flats in de Belmen die staan al jaren leeg. Terwijl wij pinaren in de hokken van BMW. Met 20 op een kamer en een stoof voor 60 man. Wij kraakten de flats, eisen woonvergunning nu. Krakers voor Bemre, krakers voor Bemre, krakers voor Bemre. Wowina streek, wowina streek. Ten koste van de gezinnen krijgen pensioenhouders hun zin. Van de gemeente krijgen ze honderden guldens winst. Verloren voor kapitalisten, onze wijken die gaan eraan. Gemeenten die spreken dezelfde taal. Krakers voor Bemre, krakers voor Bemre, krakers voor Bemre. Wowina streek, wowina streek. Surinamers en Nederlanders, Turken, Marokkanen, Spanjaarden, Antillianen maken één front. In strijd voor een betere woning tegen gemeente en kapitaal. In strijd voor een betere woning tegen gemeente en kapitaal. Laatste. Krakers voor Bemre, krakers voor Bemre, krakers voor Bemre. Wowina streek, wowina streek, wowina streek.
I don't think she quit a day of singing, right? One more time. This was fantastic. Let me. Yes, and it's very current. Nadia, you know what? I think you already caught your breath. There you go. So, like I said, you are of the National Organization of Surinamese Surinamese people in the Netherlands. Why did you found that organization at the time, and what is it doing now, if it still exists?
It doesn't exist. That's shocking. Lowkey was founded in 1973, and initially it was a unification of the various student organizations, but in no time it became a national organization of Surinamese people, because, as I said before, the independence was announced in 1975, but thousands and thousands Surinamese people fled the country in search for a better life here in Holland because of the political and economic situation. So from the Lowkey had 3 aims. The first one is to support the struggle in Suriname, because in the 70s there was a lot of strikes in Suriname, unrest, and people weren't satisfied with their life, and so there was a progressive movement coming up. And Lowkey worked together with the Democratic People's Front, and so we supported the movement in Suriname. And that was the first aim, the movement, but also, of course, the struggle of the people, the workers, the peasants, the youngsters, the women. And the second aim was here in Holland. We fought for equal rights, equal positions here in Holland, because there was a lot of racism, discrimination. There were fascist groups coming up, like now, sitting in the parliament, and
this really
police
highlights
violations.
this really highlights the continuation of the colonial relationship
In here.
from Suriname to the position of migrants in the Netherlands.
Yes, yes. So, and we fought for equal rights together with other migrant organizations and with progressive Dutch people. So we didn't thought about doing it alone. And we struggled also for, for things that were necessary here, because unemployment wasn't a Surinamese thing. And lack of houses wasn't a Surinamese thing. It was a thing for the poor people here in Holland,
And the
the
third?
workers, etc. And the third, yes, is supporting the struggle of other people in the world.
Other third
The
world.
Vietnam War, we supported South Africa, the fights in South America against the military regimes over there. So
Brilliant.
because we saw it was in one struggle. The cultural wing. From the beginning, there was a cultural wing for 2 reasons. One, colonial oppression is not only an economic thing, a political thing, it's also a cultural thing. Because the colonialism, and Dutch is not different of that, they suppressed also the culture of the people. And so we were, for example, forbidden to speak one of the languages, Ranang Tung, the song I sang with you. For example, was in that language. And so, but in spite of that, we managed to preserve our culture. And the cultural aim was to continue that struggle, to keep our culture, and to emancipate it.
To preserve Surinamese culture.
Yes.
The other activist artist, another activist artist on our podium is Sison. You were imprisoned for 9 years for the activism and your leading position in the struggle. You wrote Prison and Beyond, a collection of essays that won awards. Can you tell us about that period in prison and how poetry was part of your struggle?
Well, after the outright physical torture, which involved what they call the water cure and the usual punching, I had 5 years of psychological torture. And that means being in solitary confinement, being chained to my cot. So there is a lot of time to kill, or the time seems to kill the prisoner. I would compare to the seconds, minutes, hours, days, and so on, like blocks of lead falling on my brain. So to keep your sanity, you have to fight back, no? You have to fight back mentally, and you have to translate that into poetry. And I even would sing the poems. There was plenty of time to fight back. And so poetry was my weapon in prison. And so I was able to collect a number of poems, and I would be awarded the Southeast Asia Right Award for poetry in 1986 when I went out of prison. And I was making a joke, no? So an autocrat in the Philippines imprisoned me. And now I'm receiving an award from a monarch. Actually, because that's because the award is sponsored by and financed by the royal family of Thailand. And you know this, the current king was the crown prince then. He was the one who gave me the award, and the gold medal and the cash award. So, and of course, the biggest reward for me after fighting in prison with poetry, Marcos fell, as I had predicted.
Sison, could you do us the great honor, if that's all right with you, of reading to us maybe one or a part of the poems?
Yes.
If you want, if that's all right.
I will read one, short enough. I can read to you Fragments of a Nightmare. Fragments of a Nightmare, but that's a long poem, no? 30 stanzas. But I'll just read a fighting poem, which is about guerrilla warfare.
Let's do a pre-applause.
It's a short one. The guerrilla is like a poet, keen to the rustle of leaves, the break of twigs, the ripples of the river, the smell of fire, and the ashes of departure. The guerrilla is like a poet. He has merged with the trees, the bushes, and the rocks, ambiguous but precise, well-versed on the law of motion, and master of myriad images. The guerrilla is like a poet, enrhymed with nature, the subtle rhythm of the greenery, the outer silence, the outer innocence, the steel tensile in grace that ensnares the enemy. The guerrilla is like a poet. He moves with the green-brown multitude in bush burning with red flowers that crown and hat and all, swarming the terrain as a flood, marching at last against the stronghold. An endless movement of strength. Behold the protracted theme. The people's epic, the people's war.
What an honor. What an honor to hear this. What happens in your heart when you read this poem?
My heart also leaps, like like the idea of revolution.
It leaps like the idea of revolution. Keep saying poetry. Siswa, I want to return to you and your experience with LECRA, historically speaking. Now, when you met the members of LECRA in university, they weren't openly saying that they were members. They were operating in secret. Now, why is that? Does it tell us that indeed the dominant powers, dictatorships, and so on, are afraid of art?
Not afraid of art if it is American style of art, but art which is used as a weapons against a reactionary, also art which can mobilize people to make a demand and that kind of thing, it is afraid. Because after 65, we have another kind of Indonesia. This Willow Sukarno, with his idea for national liberation, who also inspires many countries through Asia, Africa, Latin America. And then after 65, all which has something to do with the left, let alone communism, is forbidden. And LECRA is affiliated with the Communist Party of Indonesia. That's why it is forbidden. Those who can work, let's say, confidentially, secretly, they can survive the ideas, and they got influence from time to time, up to now.
You've spent, I think, 2 or 3 decades in the Netherlands. Yeah.
Yes.
And here you continued, of course, your revolutionary ideas.
Sure.
To what extent is art that seeks fundamental change having space in mainstream Dutch cultural life, according to you?
Here. Well, that is what we can learn maybe from Lekra from the year 60s. If we can find work method as Lekra formulated at the time, maybe we can put forward the revolutionary work. And that is doing research before action. And research among the people as a Bijlmer crackers and that kind of thing. I got the impression that this song is written after observing, after investigating your own people surrounding there. With the people, yes. And I got the impression that international students have strong interest here in the Netherlands. And thanks to my contact with the Filipinos community, I can feel that the resistance is still there. Yeah? There is a space here in the Netherlands if we make that space.
There is space if we make that space. Very nice.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're making the connection with other communities of resistance. Going back to our remote speaker, Tings, before I ask my substance, very much political question, we're seeing portraits. They are yours. Could you briefly tell us what they represent? It's your own work.
Sure, maybe just as a clarification, I mean, I did most of the portraits, but it's also a collective effort, so there's some other artists involved in the Tricontinental. I'm really happy that you were able to include this, and I think it follows up really nicely to some of the poetry and music and stories that we've been hearing on the panel. I think one of the motivations for doing these posters is just a way to know our history, and make our history known to each other. It started by doing portraits of, trade unionists in South Africa, like Emma Meshinini, or wanting to learn the stories of guerrilla fighters in Cuba, like Aide Santa Maria, or, poets from Pakistan, like Faiz Ahmed Faiz. Those are our revolutionary ancestors and form part of our collective history. So it's a reminder that we come from a rich tradition of fighters.
Who is Bhagat Singh?
I would just say a second thing.
We're seeing Bhagat Singh right now. Could you briefly tell us?
Yeah, one of the most important anti-colonial revolutionaries in India. So that was part of the experiences of knowing who are these figures in our different revolutionary struggles.
Could I ask you, Tings, just to illustrate? I think this illustrates a very strong point. Mm-hmm. Mainstream culture teaches us nothing about Bhagat Singh. It teaches us, and I speak his name with all respect. I respect the man. It teaches us a lot about the non-violent struggle of Mahatma Gandhi. There's Hollywood films about that. How come we know nothing about Bhagat Singh?
I think this is a good point. I mean, one of the things is it was actually a practical matter of starting to do these portraits because there's an active erasure of the radical, most revolutionary parts of our history. And so that's not an accident. The moment why we hear less about Bhagat Singh or Ambedkar, one of the great untouchable Dalit leaders, but then we will hear much more about the nonviolent movements of Gandhi, So there's a process of writing history where our revolutionary ancestors get written out of, that come from working class struggles, peasant struggles, revolutionary struggles, where socialists and communists. And so part of doing these drawings in the first place was because it was a practical matter. A lot of these images were actually not accessible to us because of that erasure, or at best, it's kind of kept in the museums or archives of the former colonial powers. When we're doing studies about, liberation movements in South Africa to Indonesia, many of those archives actually sit not very far from where you guys are in the Netherlands. So in a way, till today, even after many years of liberation struggles, it feels like our own histories, our own images still don't belong to us yet. So part of this drawing is recover that history and also make these images available to movements today.
Great, Tings. Let me thank you and thank the 3 other speakers for their fantastic contribution. I wish we could speak longer, but time is time, and I'm grateful that we have been able to spend that little time with you that we have. Give them an applause, ladies and gentlemen. You can sit down on those. I will kindly ask you to take your seats in the audience again. As I announce one of my favorite, if not my favorite, hip-hop artists in the Netherlands. His name is Stryder. I've had the honor to play one concert with him. He'll be rapping, as he usually does, about social issues where Palestine plays a very important role. And tonight he will not be rapping, but there will be spoken words. Stryder, waar ben je? Come forward, brother. Give him a big, big Stryder applause.
Goedenavond iedereen. Mag ik een applaus voor mijn geliefde gitarist Mark? Vredesduiven vliegen of dansen niet. Mooie vlinders chansen niet meer. Gebroken vleugels lijken de oorzaak. Veroorzaakt door een oorlog in de stad van de vrede. Een gebied dat door God lijkt te zijn vergeten, maar gebeden wordt hier het meest. Allah wordt hier gevreesd en blijkt onze enige houvast. Nieuwe nederzettingen dankzij een goedgekeurd bouwplan. Ik wou dat het anders was, maar geen wens van me die uitkomt. Zeg mama dat ik vanavond niet thuis kom. Vertel haar niet te huilen, haar zonen zullen sterk zijn. Vastberaden en moedig al zijn we nog erg klein. Dit is de boodschap van 2 kinderen. 1 van 11, de ander is 9. Vastgehouden door het leger. Handen vastgebonden met tie-wraps onderweg naar gevangenissen. Vastgezet zonder procedure of rechtszaak. Vaker stenen wezen gooien, maar dit keer was het echt raak. Het risico is groot, maar wij kiezen voor demonstratie. Want dit is de we missen Faris Hoed generatie. De mijn ouders luisterden Feyrouz generatie. De ook papa heeft gebloed generatie. Maar mama schreeuwt het uit, zegt mijn zonen horen thuis. Laat ze niet slapen in jullie hondenhokken. De opsluiting van onze kinderen moet stoppen, stoppen, stoppen. Laat het stoppen. Onze zaak is een schreeuw om recht en broer. Ik schreeuw zo hard dat mijn stembanden tegenwoordig worden gecheckt door een KNO-arts. De realiteit is zo fuck dat hier onze zonen en dochters worden getroffen. Net als Malcolm X, bereid om een arm te verliezen voor vrijheid. Als de Full Metal Alchemist, het is de Palestijnse droom. In tijden van bezetting onze enige hoop, het is de Palestijnse droom. Zo waardevol dat het hier wordt bekocht met de dood. Want dit is niemand ontwortelt ons van onze roots generatie. De vuist gaat in de lucht als het moet generatie. Maar ook de niemand heeft ons van de dood behoed generatie. Dank jullie wel. Fijne avond. Peace.
Stryder, de vuist gaat in de lucht als het moet. Generatie, put your fists up for Stryder. And now give him an applause, because you can't do both at the same time. Stryder. Thanks, brother. I tell you, when I performed a song with Stryder, me singing in Arabic, he gave me such a hard time not to cry while singing. And now I had the same thing. So next time, do it when there's no audience so I can feel free. Thanks, Stryder. Our next speaker, and we'll continue the discussion about Palestine with him, is hip-hop artist Lowkey, coming all the way from the UK. Give him an applause. Karim, welcome for the second time in Amsterdam at the Arts of Resistance Festival. Yeah, take any one of them.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Great, 1, 2, 1, 2. Welcome back. How is it to be back at the Arts of Resistance Festival?
It's absolutely lovely. It's fantastic to see all of these beautiful people that have come out today. Thank you so much to Chris, to Mark, to all of the organisers for making this fantastic event. Give a round of applause for them, please.
Let me first, you've been active for many years on Palestine, actively organizing, writing many songs. What's happening in Palestine now? And why are we seeing it again?
Well, the situation is the Palestinians have been resisting over a century of settler colonialism. It's one of the longest struggles against colonialism that we have seen. And, you know, the important thing I think to focus on is how where we are relates to what is happening in Palestine. So the organization that I am a part of, Palestine Action, we have successfully shut down 2 Israeli arms factories in England in the last 6 months. And when I say shut down, I mean they have permanently abandoned the premises because of a sustained campaign of direct action. Now, the important thing to remember, I guess, as we are in the Netherlands, is that the Dutch police signed a deal with Elbit Systems in 2019. Elbit Systems is the largest Israeli arms company, and it's the arms company that we have been targeting in England. The deal that was signed in 2019 outsourced the wiretapping and also the cybersecurity of the Dutch police to Elbit Systems. Now, the key point to emphasize here is that as far as I understand, the technology is yet to be installed. That is in 2022. So I would humbly argue for the inclusion of this in any campaign around Palestine in this country for several reasons. Number one, when Elbit Systems have access to the data of the Dutch police, it means nobody that is active around Palestine in the country is safe. Number two, Elbit Systems acts as an arm of the Israeli government. Number three, post the NSO group Pegasus spyware scandal, you've seen even the European Union announce an investigation into the NSO group. This is another arm of the Israeli government. But also importantly, even key figures in Dutch intelligence have commented publicly about this idea of outsourcing key functions of the Dutch police to foreign companies. So there is quite a lot of momentum on the side of those who in this country were they to campaign against Elbit Systems having that role in collecting data on the Dutch population and also having the wiretapping function of the Dutch police outsourced to an Israeli arms company.
But of course it's also part of the divestment and boycott campaign against Israel. Could you briefly touch on that?
So the basic premise is that Israel, because of its policies, should be boycotted, and the step towards divestment and then the step towards sanctions. Of course, The argument that people sometimes make is, why would you exceptionalize Israel? Well, the actual truth is that Israel is exceptionalized by the international community. It is suspected of carrying out an assassination campaign in up to 18 different foreign states. We are talking about in 2019, for example, if I remember correctly, 19 or 20, there were 23 UN General Assembly resolutions condemning states. 17 of those condemned Israel. Now, despite the fact that Israel has this clear policy of occupying land in contravention of international law, of refusing Palestinians their right to return under UN Resolution 194, of literally exporting spyware all across the world, over 50,000 journalists, human rights activists and others have had their phones hacked by this Pegasus spyware. Despite that, Israel has not faced any consequences in terms of sanction. So for that reason, the idea of BDS is that you put pressure in the correct places and you get the result, which is the sanctioning of Israel. But we in Palestine Action also take the position that lobbying governments and lobbying companies has its limitations. So direct action has proven in just a short space of 6 months that we can shut down arms factories successfully.
That is very impressive indeed. Despite that Israel stands accused, amongst others, and I quote, of terrorizing a civilian population, the Palestinians. This is a UN resolution I'm quoting. It is able to continue doing what it's doing. It is backed by Western countries. Is the case of Israel, apart from the fact that they are colonizing land, a form of continued Western imperialism in the Middle East region?
Well, without a doubt, Israel wouldn't be able to do what it does without $10.6 million being sent to it daily by the US taxpayer. It wouldn't have been able to establish itself as an apartheid entity without the Balfour Declaration and the British Mandate, in which the first British High Commissioner was actually tasked with applying the Balfour Declaration, which meant the establishment of separate institutions. That meant separate healthcare institutions, separate educational institutions. So it was in that way that the British Empire established the very basis of the apartheid state. We know that Britain, occupying 14 million square miles of the planet, developed many different practices which were then later adopted. You know, of course, Ireland was a key laboratory for British imperialism and colonialism, and was later then many of the tactics were adopted in other places that were developed and innovated in Ireland.
Now, you are an artist, a rapper, and there was a campaign to kick you out of Spotify, organized by the Israeli Zionist lobby in the UK. Censorship, isn't it? Could you tell us about that?
So an organization by the name of We Believe in Israel, which is led by a political consultant of arms companies by the name of Luke Akehurst. It was a project of BICOM, which is the largest Israel lobby group in England, which itself was founded by Pojo Zabludovic, who a lot of his money came from Soltam Systems, an arms company subsumed by Elbit Systems. So around
Let me just quickly interrupt, Karim. These things that you are sharing with us, that's public knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
We can Google all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so around the time we had the success in forcing Elbit Systems to sell its subsidiary, one of its subsidiaries in England, Ferranti Technologies. This was a subsidiary that it acquired for £15 million. We forced it to sell this subsidiary for £9 million. This was Palestine Action in coordination and cooperation with the local community. Around that time, you started to see an intensification of a campaign which has been 10 years long, actually. And one sort of element of that campaign was seeking to take my song off of Spotify on the basis that it was tantamount to incitement. Now, the important thing of violence. Now, the important thing to remember is that...
Which song is this? I'm sorry?
Long Live Palestine.
All right.
So Israel has a policy of arresting Palestinian journalists and even children for things they post on Facebook and on social media on the basis of incitement. So, for example, you had the poet Darin Tatur, Palestinian poet, who was imprisoned for 5 months and went through a 3-year ordeal in court because of the poem that she wrote on Facebook, Qawim ya sha'bi qawimhum, resist them, my people, resist them. Now, when Darin Tatur was in prison, she asked her jailer for a pen, at which point the jailer said to her, you, especially you, will not be given a pen. And so she used the zipper from her coat to write poems on the wall of her cell. Now, following her release, Darin Tatur was given the Freedom of Expression Oxfam Award, as far as I remember, in The Hague. So this is a clear indictment of this policy of labeling art as incitement. And actually, between 2015 and 2018, you saw 500 Palestinians imprisoned by Israel on the charge of incitement for things they posted on Facebook, and some of them were children. There are 15 journalists in prison in Israeli dungeons right now for the crime of incitement.
And there was a very famous one killed very recently.
Shireen Abu Aqla, of course. And so it's the way in which the blending of definition between art and investigative confrontational journalism becomes about incitement.
Take us back to your context. Now, you're very humble and you talk about things that happen to other people, but I think the case of the Israel lobby trying to take away one of your songs off Spotify.
Not one.
Not one more, in fact. How does that illustrate campaigns to repress opinions that seek to show colonial practices here in the West?
It's one terrain in which they are engaging me. The other terrain is by lobbying unions, political parties, venues to cancel events featuring me. So I would say from March to now, at least 80% of my live work has been cancelled thanks to that campaign. There's sort of varying success in different places. Like I say, Spotify was a harder terrain for them to engage me on, because we also had the support of, Hollywood superstars like Mark Ruffalo. We had the support of UN Special Rapporteur on Housing. She signed it. Leilani Farha. Even Diana, Princess of Jordan, signed the
So where did this
petition.
end? Were the songs taken away?
No. So up until now, the Israel lobby has not successfully taken me as an artist off
Of
of
Spotify, but they did manage to cancel many of your live events.
That's
There's another
correct,
case,
yeah.
and that is you are now the host of a podcast called Watchdog. It provides, among others, critical political analysis. We could at least argue it's a perspective. And it's for Mint Press. And the PayPal account of Mint Press was blocked.
Correct.
And this is also related to the opinions expressed.
Well, yes, it is related to the opinions expressed, and you have a well-known Israel lobby group, the Anti-Defamation League, which the FBI, even in their internal memos in 1969, said, and this is a direct quote from the FBI memo, that it is inconceivable, that it is incredible to assume that the ADL is not furnished to an official of the Israeli government. And the ADL has a specific deal with PayPal to help investigate people through PayPal, unfortunately. And so we have suspicions as to why this happened to the media company, but regardless of that, we are still pushing on.
Now, these are attempts, one could argue, to silence individual artists. Let's take it to a more mainstream level. How does mainstream Western culture, generally speaking, according to you, facilitate the legitimization and the making possible of the continuation of colonialism?
Well, I mean, as was alluded to earlier on, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, these are key institutions of Western imperialism today, but it is in decline, and I think it's important to also be aware of that. You know, you look at Britain, for example, it's currently the 5th largest economy. Over the next decade or so, it is due to fall to the 11th largest economy. The 20 fastest growing economies, none of them are in Europe, and several of them are former British colonies.
Could I just quickly interrupt? So these are, of course, monetary and financial organizations, but could we maybe zoom on how mainstream Western culture, so the Hollywood film industry, songs, etc., how do they reproduce ideas that make colonialism look nice, or at least hide it?
So at least over 800 Hollywood films have had direct involvement of the CIA or the US Department of Defense, even in co-production, in script writing. So for instance, you look at a film like Independence Day, when it was originally, the kind of way that this arrangement works is that if you want to use high-tech equipment that only the US military has, then you have to make your script available to the US military. It's too expensive for you to rent, even for Hollywood big blockbusters. So the US military will willingly give you access to their equipment to use in the films. However, they then essentially have a role in co-producing the film. So whether it is Homeland or 24 or some of the biggest shows that we've ever known, Independence Day, Top Gun, all have had involvement directly by the US military, including in editing scripts.
But hold on, Karim. One could say, hold on, we live in a democracy.
Well, I think Sheldon Wallen, the Princeton academic, coined the phrase inverted totalitarianism, and I am careful with that phrasing. What he meant was, in traditional totalitarianism, the way it's understood, is when the state dominates the economic and cultural sphere of the country. Now, what he argues is that what we live in Britain, but also in the United States, is a situation where the political sphere is subject and is subjugated by the economic sphere, meaning that we can't vote against the interests of big arms companies like BAE Systems, we can't vote against the interests of big arms companies like Lockheed Martin, and we certainly can't really vote against the interests of the intelligence services. So that is the way in which the United States is able to really project the image of itself around the world while having around 1,000 military bases across the planet, that somehow it has a free and fair process.
Brilliant. Karim, thank you so far. Please give Karim a hand before we go to the next session. Stay with us. Karim will be performing tonight, and I would also like to point out, before we move to the questions and answer session where you can ask the questions to the panels, let me point out that the Plant een Olijfboom campaign, Plant an Olive Tree campaign, is sitting outside of this room. And to the left, am I right? Yes. To the left. So if you'd like to contribute to the struggle of Palestine, you can plant a tree by making a donation. Let's do that. Could I, if it's not too much to ask, could I please ask the previous panel to come forward again and receive some of the questions and panels from the audience, if that's all right? All right. So Chris here will be running around with a microphone. Can we have some light on the audience? Just a little. Okay, fantastic. Now, what I find very impressive at this festival, that it's 9:45 on a Saturday evening, and here we are sitting discussing colonialism and other political affairs. That's very impressive. I'm sure you might have questions and comments on your mind to any of the members of the panel. Let's see who has a question or a comment. Please raise your hand and don't be shy.
I'm focusing with people who will ask, yeah?
You can share your thoughts, sympathize, disagree, ask a question related to the facts, express an opinion. It's all up to you. Maybe one more round of applause for the members of the previous panel. I'll wait a little more. Okay, so I see a hand going up there. Perfect. Tell us your name and try to keep your question short and concise.
Yes, I just want to, my name is Miguel Navarrete, and my question, I guess, is directly to all the panelists. I think it's very, first of all, I want to just say that it's very refreshing, especially in this country, to hear, you know, the enemies, per se, of our movements named so clearly and concisely. And I guess my question is, what do you feel? You see the room staring back at all of you. How do you feel that we all feel right now? What is the mood actually we're all in? Because we all, as you keep pointing out, talking about this, these subjects at this hour on a Saturday. So I want to know what the panelists see within the faces in the audience, and how do you think the mood is, really?
Nice question. Joma, I would like to give the question to you. What do you think is the impact of your words on the audience?
Well, I'm very happy about the mood of the audience. The audience has been enthusiastic in welcoming the critique of imperialism, and every arousing statement concerning the need to fight the enemy. The audience is clearly on the side of a revolution.
Nadia.
English. Well, the audience is warm. When I sang there and saw the face, because sometimes it's dark, so you can't see any expression. But it's very enthusiastic and open for the information.
Yeah. Are there more comments and questions in the room? Okay, there's a question over there. Thank you very much, Miguel, by the way. Give Miguel an applause, please.
Hello, my name is Cecilia. I'm from Brazil, and my question is for Nadia. I was wondering if the possible election of President Lula in Brazil and other president of left-wing being elected in South America, does that bring a wave of hope for Suriname and for you as a fellow Latin American?
A left-wing president in Suriname now?
No, in Brazil. So if left-wing politicians come to power in Latin America, does that give hope for Suriname?
Oh yeah, of course. Because Suriname is in Latin America, and the people there follows the news over there, mostly Holland, but also over there. So as we have the inspiration in the 70s of what was going on in the world, I think that will be an inspiration too. But you can't have, it will be an inspiration, only an inspiration, but you have to do it in your own country. You have to have an organization over there. And the military dictatorship killed 15 people, the Surinamese killed 15 people in 1982, and most democratic people, most progressive people. One of them was Bram Bear, I mention his name, one of the revolutionaries of Suriname. So there was a fully undemocratic situation, a lot of tension. So the left-wing movement that we were building in the 70s was really, how do you say it, diminished. And a lot of people came here. So we have to build up again.
Fantastic.
But it would be an inspiration.
Thank you very much for your question. I think the microphone went up, am I right? Shoot.
Hi, my name is Ibrahim. I'm from London. On a personal level, thank you to all the panelists for your individual acts of resistance within your own context, and every time your freedom was threatened, every act and form of resistance you guys carried out, so thank you. It's a very basic question, but I always stand by saying prevention is better than cure. What advice would you give your younger self, if you could, in order to better the form of activism that you guys carry out?
Karim. Let me just say, he was kind of involved in the struggle when he was super, super young, but still.
I'd probably say don't punch that policeman in the face. I really would say that. I would actually
so
say
where
focus on,
should we punch? Is that kind of...
I would say focus on joining an organization as early as possible.
How do you pick the right one?
Again, that is a question. I think what matters, though, is that you are taking collective action as quickly as possible, because I think a lot of, the neoliberal age, and part of the thing that I was going to say about what's great about, this fantastic audience, is that actually discredits the mythology that art, which is explicitly political and which is on the side of the human rather than the corporation, actually appeals to people. Because, music specifically is monopolized by 3 companies. That's Sony, Universal, and Warner. Over 90% of all the music heard in the world is owned by those 3 companies. If you were to look at the amount of investment that those companies put into politically challenging music, then you actually see clear intentions really behind that. So yeah, I would say just join an organization as quickly as possible and work on asserting will through that organization.
Thanks, Karim. Thanks, Ibrahim. There's a question all the way in the back.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Luisa. My question is more. I'm missing a bit a call to action. How can we, from the global north, let's say, we can help in the global south? How can we blur this division between the south and the north? Because it is actually non-existent. I feel sometimes here, I'm Colombian, and sometimes I feel like here people are forgetting how to struggle, how to go against also things that are not working here. So there are many things that we can learn from the struggles in the global south. Thank you very much for sharing. And what can we do here now to help and to blur this division?
Siswa.
Thank you very much. So very good questions. I think we can make use of the technology, the available technology. At least we can create the space broader who can reach the artists who serve for the people in the south through Zoom, webinar and something like that, at least. Yeah? And moreover, in an occasion like this, we are happy we have our Egyptian struggle fighter from New York, but we can also invite others. Yeah. Bring it here. That's all what I can say at the moment.
We have a question over there. Thank you very much, Siswa, and thanks for the question. We have a question over there. Can we have a microphone? All right, cool, no problem. Go for it.
Hi, my name is Manu. I'm from Angola, and we have been free from the colonized in '75 from the Portuguese, and now we have a kind of neo-colonialist system. We had like a couple of days ago the elections. The electors chose to stop with the regime, but they try to change the results. We have now this big struggle down in Angola right now, happens right now. So how the room can help us, and what you guys from the panel can advise us in Angola to keep on this struggle, because it's now or never, because they are very fragile, and they lose the election, they try to manipulate, but that's the problem right now, right here, right now. When we are talk, people are being killed on the street to demonstrate, be in jail to demonstrate, what we can do, what the room can help us. Thank you.
Joma. Let's wait until the question is written out. Thank you very much, by the way. I believe Angola was the first European colony, and I think it took 500 years to get rid of the Portuguese.
The proletariat and people of Angola can take advantage of the current world situation, like the Filipino people and the Palestinian people can. All major contradictions in the world today are intensifying. And it seems coming on top of the major contradictions are those developing between the US and China. They used to be partners in promoting neoliberalism all over the world. And that was the result of the revisionist betrayal of socialism of wherever socialism had been established, as in the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, and China itself. So this signifies the utter worsening of the world the crisis of the world capitalist system. Now, in every capitalist country, the contradiction between labor and capital is intensifying, but you have to make up for the time when these revisionist parties were still rollicking around, no? As if they had the truth from the Soviet Union. We in Europe and elsewhere in the capitalist world have to do some catch up. No? Now there is also the contradiction, of course, the contradiction between the imperialist powers and the global south. That is continuing. And I think the opportunities are rising. You see, the US had tricked itself into creating China as an ally, and then now as a political rival. Neoliberalism is unraveling, and the US has lost $10 trillion since 1991 in the pursuit of the neoconservative policy of launching ceaseless wars of aggression. They left, although the Taliban were the one gaining power in Afghanistan, but you must take notice that without the use of stingers, the Taliban was able to compel the US to withdraw from Afghanistan. That's a good indicator for many countries of the world. You can kick out the US, and but considering the intensifying contradictions of the imperialist powers, on one side you have China, the new imperialist powers, China and Russia, and you have the traditional imperialist powers on the other side, headed by the US. Well, it's now clear that the sources of weapons for the people of the South will increase. And mark this. The people
Last point, Joma.
The people themselves can seize the weapons from the enemy, and they can make the weapons themselves. A swarm of pistoleros can overpower any team of policemen or soldiers.
Thank you very much, Joma. One last very brief question, because we're running out of time. Go for it.
Okay, my name is Carl Steinmetz. I'm from Indonesia. Thank you all for being radical. I do love that, but my question is basically about Indonesia. I've been there at a time where Sukarno was still alive. I've met him through my father. And I thought he was a great man. And after that, in 65, 66, there was a genocide. Suharto was blamed for it, which I think is not true. The CIA should be blamed for that. But I still think, but maybe you're able to explain that Indonesia still benefits from the US. Why? It's one of the biggest populated countries in Asia, in East Asia, and why do they care that much about the US?
Thank you very much. A very brief response to a very pertinent question.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the questions. Yes, why the US influence is still there? Because the power relations is still dominated and led by the US and Chinese, contemporary Chinese power. And they oppress the people's movement there until now, after after 65, 66, as you indicated already. Yeah. Thus, once in a while, there is a movement which can put the President Suharto aside, and then we have a reform movement, but it is not really revolutionary. It is still awaited, a revolutionary movement there. Thus, we are still, it is still there, the struggle. It is still weak, still small one. We need to work together with the international solidarity, and talking about the most backbone of the revolutionary forces, we can mention the labor power. It is now arising. The peasant movement, it's also arising. The youth, the students, the women activists also arising. We hope that, within a couple of years, there is a stronger organization, some mass-oriented, mass-line organization appear. There is a possibility there. We should be always optimists. Yeah. That's all what I can say.
Brilliant optimism once more.
So I'm Esther. I'm from Plant een Olijfboom, Plant an Olive Tree, and what I feel is that a lot of people find it hard to keep hope when it's about Palestine, because it's been going on for so long, and they don't feel that they have the power to change this. We plant olive trees as a way to resist colonization of the land, but also to keep hope alive. My question to Karim is how do you keep hope, and how can we encourage people to know that the power of the people is greater than the people in power?
Well, I mean, when we talk about the Zionist idea, the idea of Israel, it has numerous pressure points within it, which are major vulnerabilities. And when force is applied to some of those pressure points, you see essentially an open door. So what I mean by that is, for instance, at least 65,000 construction workers in Israel are Palestinians. They went on strike for one day, and it cost the Israeli economy just in that day $40 million. In fact, the head of the Builders Association in Israel said, we cannot build without these people. About 50% of the pharmacists are Palestinian. You had 10% of the bus drivers go on strike there in one day in 2001, and it caused the cancelling of 300 journeys. You also had the Palestinian armed resistance, and the Palestinians have the right in international law to armed resistance, mean that the airport shut down. So overall, the economy was cost over $300 million in a very short space of time, and the shekel fell. So the potential for economic paralysis when there is the assertion of extreme violence on a captive, small population in large population but in a very densely populated place like Gaza happens, you have a lot of space in which Israel's violence can be restrained. I'm someone who, from 2009, 2014, you saw 2,400 people killed in a very short space of time. The most recent campaigns, you've seen a smaller amount of people, which means that the parameters of Israel's militarism and the rationality of its militarism is actually being imposed by us.
By resisting.
We shut down Leicester, right, a factory in Leicester, for 6 consecutive days. The entire local community came out with us. So every single time there is this assertion of spectacular violence, you see all of the other forms of resistance become sharper and more pronounced. So it makes all of that a lot more difficult.
Okay.
There's space for optimism there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I would like to go on for another few hours at least, but let me thank you and ask you to take your seats kindly once more in the audience. Thank you very much, Siswa, Joma, Tings, and Karim. Give them a big applause. The next spoken word performance, and this will be the last one, is by Chris, who is one of the main organizers of this event, and Max on the duduk, also one of the main organizers of this event. Let's do it the following way. There's a program going on downstairs where there's the DJ, and there's also the performance of Karim, so please stay with us. And let me thank you very much for your presence. Give yourself a huge applause for coming out and supporting us. And after the spoken words performance is done, you give a huge applause and then you try to move out of the room ASAP because capitalist rules. We gotta give the room back. All right, give an applause to Chris and Max.
Moving through the mountains, the wailing of the duduk, the sound of my people. Oh Ararat, how have you become a wasteland surrounded by fences and soldiers, weapons of war. Stories like Potosi, so many sacred spirits murdered for silver and gold. Portasar, the ancient ruins. We know our ancestors were there for thousands of years. Like the Zaytunitzad of my great-grandparents crossing Syrian deserts to be exiled again by the Nekba, the perpetual diaspora. Still, there remain deserts to cross from the Sahara to the Mediterranean, where weapons of war await for those who would suffer the same fate. At the hands of petty men, insignificant, who look at the stars and see no wonders or mystery, but only wonder about colonizing planets in the distance afar. Cecil Rowe, Talab Pasha, Imperial Dream. The soil remembers as the olive trees do, who gave them water or poisoned them with the blood of their kin. As their mighty wings spread, the winged dogs at Alesses descend, licking our wounds, resurrecting warriors. From deep into the earth, rooted and strong, a flower blooms in your center, telling you to fight, singing the songs of old. The voice speaking to us of the world to come, trying to be born. It is an echo of the many worlds lost, trying, grasping, demanding to be reborn. From the ashes like a phoenix, the thousands upon thousands of bodies carrying ancient knowledge, sacred healers, tortured and burned of the stakes of the Inquisition and the capitalist courts. Like leaders crucified or hanged, like Tula and Tupac Amaru, their spirits are calling for justice. Oh, you capitalist class who swallowed the world for petty greed and nightmares of power. The dead do haunt you. The dead do haunt you as we, movement of movements, stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, whether spiritual or political, peasants or workers, all of them breathing down your neck. Can you feel us? Like the voice of a mountain moving the earth, demanding from you class treason. To abandon your riches and your power, to receive in return like mighty rivers flowing the strength of your own heart and your place on this earth. Adolescents, winged dogs of resurrection descending from the heavens so that Ararat lives on in the spirit of resistance of our founder Hike. In that silent moment as we cross our bows and gaze at the heavens, our arrows piercing through the night sky, rushing for the heart of the tyrant. Look up at the stars like Portasad, knowing that the breath of the universe waits calm to reclaim its own rhythm.